the typical sort of argument that we hear is that in Europe, a typical PTT or a service provider owns the wireless assets as well, so it's relatively easier for them to do fixed mobile conversions, whereas in the US the consolidation has only just begun, and although you have people like AT&T that own both wireline and wireless assets, but you don't find a lot of the service providers in North America, and therefore the take-up of FMC in North America is not that great. Is that what you see as well?
On the consumer side, historically, Europe has been more advanced on FMC than North America. North America is just getting going, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
But there have been efforts in the enterprise side earlier on in North America than there were even in Europe. Most of that was based around hosted solutions or billing solutions. So in some respects, for one of the few times in history in wireless, North America has a bit of a lead in enterprise FMC. Not massive, but a few months, maybe a year.
Okay, as I mentioned, I've been following FMC for the last couple of years, and initially I remember when I first came across the technology and the capabilities, I was really excited, and I thought this was going to be a big market, but it has turned out to be not such a big market. What factors do you think is keeping it from becoming a big market?
I agree with you. I think it will be a big market, but it's extremely complex because regardless of if you're talking consumer or enterprise, it's changing people's business models. And whenever you do that, you have people that are resistant. You have models that cut people out. It replaces fixed lines, or it takes usage away from wireless operators. So people have to change their thinking to the problem. As a result, it makes it slower. In some cases, it stops it. Sometimes you have failed trials. It's a very complex process when you dip into the business model.
You mentioned it cuts some of the people out. There is obviously a theory going around that it cuts out the PBX vendors. It can also sometimes cut out the carriers who can cannibalize their revenues. But let's touch upon that point later on. First of all, let's discuss the PBX vendors, the impact it has on them. So your solution effectively cuts down on the number of extensions in form of the IP phones that a typical enterprise would otherwise deploy. So do you therefore find yourself effectively competing with the likes of Nortel, Avaya, Cisco?
Initially, when people look at FMC for an enterprise, they will usually draw the conclusion that you're trying to take something away from the PBX. The PBX vendors have all concluded they have to get involved in enterprise FMC and enterprise mobility. How that's done is the tricky part, to your point. So initially, there's resistance. And then if they take a strategic perspective, they realize there's a lot of value they can provide in how that mobility occurs in the enterprise. But if you just count desk sets, you will come up with an answer that's competitive. If you think about enterprise mobility, you'll think of an answer that's complementary versus competitive.
Okay. Now let's talk about on the carrier side. I mean, typically an enterprise user or a consumer, they're able to make phone calls over the Wi-Fi and they don't pay anything for that. But that in turn, if a phone call would otherwise have gone over the GSM network and now it's traveling over the Wi-Fi network, so you're effectively substituting a minute from a GSM carrier. And so you're cannibalizing their revenues. Do you think that is a factor that keeps FMC from getting deployed and growing?
Wi-Fi and its role in FMC definitely is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, to your point. The carriers, in many cases, not all, in many cases view it as competitive. It's stealing a minute off their network. By the same token, Wi-Fi voice often has a lot of overhyping that occurs. People think it's free and it takes no additional investment in the Wi-Fi infrastructure. Many people have tried it and learned that it takes a lot of additional investment, and so that enterprises will then run away from it. When the carrier and an enterprise look at it together and figure out what it needs and how it needs to be invested in, they can often arrive at a win-win scenario where some Wi-Fi for them will work in concert with the GSM or CDMA or IMS network.
I see. Which then obviously brings us to your sort of solution. I mean, you're positioning your solution as something that will not lead to cannibalization of carrier revenues. Can you maybe explain how you make that happen?
Sure. Our perspective is that you've got to involve the carrier and the enterprise together for the most successful FMC deployment for an enterprise. And if the carrier views the enterprise as an opportunity and the enterprise views the carrier as a method to get services, then they can deploy a system that is beneficial for both. And what we do is we provide intelligence into the PBX and we provide intelligence into the carrier that brings those two worlds together, so you have a win-win for both parties.
I see. And that model, I guess, the industry calls a hybrid model.
Yes, we call that the hybrid model as opposed to an enterprise-centric or a carrier-centric.
Okay. So with FMC, you have an enterprise-hosted solution or service, and you have a carrier-hosted service or solution, and then you have this hybrid model,
Correct.
which kind of mixes the two.
Correct. Takes the benefits from both and tries to remove the detriments of either one.
But it seems like, I mean, the kind of solution that you are promoting, that Tango Networks is promoting, it seems that you are focused more on the benefits for a service provider as opposed to benefits for an end user. Because if you overemphasize the fact that you're not going to cannibalize the revenues of a service provider through your FMC solution, through the FMC offering based on your solution, then would that imply that you are kind of de-emphasizing the end user benefits?
That's a very good point. One of the things that we think is essential is that the end user is an equal stakeholder in this entire triumvirate of the carrier, the enterprise, and the end user. We believe we've put together a solution that allows the end user to use existing devices with no change in their behavior. So things that they're used to doing on the mobile phone, the send end, things that they're used to doing on the PBX, extension dialing or conferencing or message waiting indication, they all would work on the mobile phone with Tango exactly like they do today. So removing the resistance and the barriers to usage.
A different question related to the factors driving FMC. I've been looking at voicemail as an analogy here, and my theory is you are effectively trying to increase the call completion rate, which is what voicemail did as well for a service provider. So can you draw any analogy here between a voicemail and the FMC solution in the sense that both are trying to increase the call completion rates? And if there is an analogy here, then what does that mean in terms of the prospects of FMC going forward?
One of the benefits of a true seamless FMC solution, to your point, is you increase significantly 3 or 4 times the first call answer. So literally, in a classic non-FMC solution, you would get the first call answer 15 or 20% of the time. If you put in a FMC solution where the desk and the mobile are seamlessly integrated, you can raise your call completion percentage to over 50% for first time. So at that point, you increase accessibility, you increase termination rates, like your analogy on voicemail. However, one of the things that is a detriment of voicemail is it's still deposited and then you have to retrieve it. So now if 50% of those voicemail deposits are eliminated and are now answered, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes a day are suddenly freed up. You're not pulling up voicemail. So yes, you're increasing call completion rate like voicemail, but you're also improving responsiveness. You're changing it from hours to minutes to instantaneous.